Welcome back to the channel, guys. It's Gacha Josh here once again. In this video, we're going to be going over some of the 5-star characters that were available during the Chaos Era Nightmares playtest. I'm going to give you a brief overview of their kits as they were in the beta to help you establish potential reroll targets, just characters that playstyles you might enjoy if you want to target them for that reason during the reroll, or if you want to base their meta value off this video, that is fine too. Do note though that the developers said that they will likely make some more additional adjustments before launch, so I'm not going to go super deep into absolute specifics for character cards and upgrades and how they might interact with the roguelite environment of CZN, but instead I'm going to be focusing on each character's general playstyle as well as their utility. I want to press this super hard. Keep this in mind, it is based on early game experience during the beta, so take anything you see here with a little bit of salt at least, all right? Get some granules in there. And in my experience, most of the characters felt good, but it came down to your playstyle preference. And if you like this video, let me know down below and we'll cover some of the 4 stars as well. My personal favorite that I'm going to be using in conjunction with some of the characters you might see here being Tressa, my favorite 4-star of the game. Now, one of the characters that's probably going to be changed the most, and in fact, I think the developers have already said that they're going to change here, is going to be Khalipe. Khalipe, though, is an insanely strong character, at least she was in the beta. In TLDR, what you'll see here presented, I do think already has been changed a little bit. And the way that they're changing her is they're going to be making her more of a defensive support-oriented style character, by loosening up on some of the damage that she does bring with her cards and skills. With that in mind, Khalipe is going to be a defense scaling vanguard of the Light and Instinct element, who was an absolute powerhouse during the beta. Her gameplay did revolve around high cast cards that could be chained for massive AoE as well as tenacity damage and shield generation. Some of the changes the devs have said is going to be reducing the AoE damage that she does, but making her more of a shield generating and tenacity monster. Some of the core cards of her deck include Vulture Launch or Ejection, which both deal damage and granting a shield, coming at a pretty pricey cost of 3 AP each. And each of these cards has 3 special tags on it, which ensure it doesn't just become a sitting duck in your hand unused when you don't have the excess AP to use them. Celestial, for example, can trigger when another card of 2 cost or higher is played. After activation, it's going to return from your graveyard back to the hand due to the tag of Retrieve, and then Retain carries a card over to the next round. These sorts of mechanics make her pretty AP efficient because you're getting the benefit out of a card without actually having to pay its cost. And this is one of the reasons why Khalipe stood out during the playtest. She was capable of doing multiple great things: AoE damage, AoE tenacity break, and making her AP efficient and even generating AP so you can use other high cost skills or just multiple other cost need skills from your hand during the same turn. And while she does seem to shine on building shields and doing AoE damage, she might, be a little worse against single target bosses, but since most of the early game content she shines in, she's probably, even after changes, gonna make your experience in early game very, very nice. Next up is going to be Mei Lin. Mei Lin's going to be a single target striker. She's going to be the fire and passion element with the unique ability to apply elemental weaknesses to her targets. This is going to boost both her skill as well as tenacity damage, making her a likely core member or even a sub DPS for a lot of future passion teams. She's pretty straightforward and easy to play, as she's mainly about applying a weakness debuff and just doing damage. Additional attacks will extend the debuff duration of the weakness debuff, which is quite important as it is a final damage multiplier increase of 25%. In my opinion, Mei Lin seems to be dedicated to her role as a tenacity breaker. She's got a couple 0-cost cards to ensure that RNG doesn't keep her from performing her role by applying weaknesses and being able to make it so your team's more easily able to destroy the enemy's tenacity gauge and do additional damage with that weakness as well. Destroying the tenacity gauge is quite nice as it's going to give you that bonus AP, and in conjunction with her 0-cost card skills, you can make your team pretty AP efficient with Mei Lin in it. So if you're looking for a solid single target damage dealer as well as someone to break those tenacity shields, Mei Lin's going to be a pretty interesting character for you to pick up if you're interested in a single target DPS at launch. Next up is going to be my personal favorite character, and probably the one that I'm going to be rerolling for, which is going to be Kayron. Straight out of Epic 7 himself, Kayron's going to be a psionic of the dark and void element, who next to Khalipe is quite amazing, as he's one of the few characters who excels at dealing AoE damage. Now, his core mechanic revolves around card exhaustion. And the card exhaustion mechanic is a card that will remove itself from the deck or remove itself when it is played. He himself has two abilities which create exhaustible cards named Futility, which are used for some of his main banishing mechanics that you'll see from some of his other cards. In general, you're going to want to pair him with other characters that help him banish these cards or run exhaust cards themselves, or other characters who can generate a lot of AP so you can just use and cast Futility without caring. Once you accomplish his big setup, he does have giant nukes that either have their cost reduced or their damage boosted for every card that's been exhausted during the round. If you have an AP generator and an amplifier or someone else who can put out and exhaust cards, he's likely to put up some very awesome numbers, and I had a great time playing with him during the beta. And the greatest thing about Kayron is, for potential allies, there's quite a few of them, as the exhaust card tag isn't all that rare. In fact, there are multiple characters who have zero cost cards or like to play with exhaust cards. For example, Orlea can create summons that are exhausted when played. Bullet characters like Luke fall into that category as well. And one of my favorite partners with Kayron is going to be Tressa, who likes to create shadow daggers, and you can even play these shadow daggers for zero. Hopefully that makes its way to launch, because it was great in the beta. Kayron's going to be one of the heaviest hitting damage dealers in AoE. It was outstanding AoE damage, and his single target damage was still pretty competitive. The one downside of Kayron is that he does directly interact with one of the main mechanics of Chaos Zero Nightmare's card system, which is exhaust. And as he's directly interacting with a main gameplay mechanic, his setup's going to be a little bit more complicated than just simply playing the strongest cards in your hand every turn or doing something like we talked about. But I think he's fun and interactive, and I cannot wait to get my hands on him when CZN launches. Now we have Renoa. Now Renoa is going to be a hunter of the dark and void element as well, that specializes in single target burst damage via extra attacks. Renoa likes to create cards that are exhausted when played. However, unlike other cards of this nature, it can be sent to the graveyard, which triggers an extra attack. Therefore, she's incentivized to generate these exhaust cards, but then not use them and build them up as many as she can so that more bonus attacks are unleashed as the battle progresses. Her whole kit revolves around these bullet cards, either generating them or discarding them, as discarding the bullets triggers extra attacks and extra actions, retains them in the deck, and simultaneously boosts her attack cards as well. And because of this, her playstyle is a little bit on the slower side, but her abilities seem to flow pretty well when discarding cards and using her gimmick overall. Her setup is pretty much complete once you've discarded 10 or so bullet cards, which is the limit that one can hold in your hand. She can then use her ultimate to draw the bullets from the deck and then end her turn to just dump a bunch of single target damage to a single enemy and absolutely blow them away. And the best part too is that if you do all of this and the enemy still isn't dead for some reason, it's okay, because her bullets will remain in the deck because you discarded them instead of playing them, so you're not gonna have to start her ramp up from the beginning. So while she might not be the best suited character for super short fights and doing AoE damage, she does seem like she's going to be one of the best boss killers at launch. Hugo, my man Hugo, is going to be a hunter of wind/order element that's going to revolve around doing extra attacks and damage that way. Though compared to Renoa, he's less bursty and more sustained. He starts the battle by playing an upgrade card that grants him stacks of a buff called Hunt Commence whenever an ally uses non-attack cards. When he has at least one stack, you can then easily track via the crosshair symbol next to his picture. He will then perform an extra attack when anyone, himself included, deals single target damage. Once triggered, a stack is going to be consumed. Hunt Commence can have up to 5 stacks and grants higher damage multipliers with more stacks. His entire kit is about either generating more stacks, buffing up his extra attack damage, including his ultimate, and reaching fully stacked and buffed up scenarios, he can hit impressive numbers during the beta while maintaining a pretty simple and quick to understand playstyle, either by aggressively using his cards to ramp him up quickly or by having him assist via his extra attacks, giving him more of a cost-effective sub-DPS role if you desire. As far as team building goes with Hugo, it seemed to be a pretty broad team selection. He only kind of requires allies. He used non-attack cards every once in a while, which most healers and supports tend to do. While he's not the most exciting character that I got to play with during the beta, he seems to be pretty solid, and if someone who has the potential to burst up and do sub DPS while also having a nice sustained damage threshold as well, he could be someone that you could be pretty happy with in your Chaos Zero Nightmare experience. Veronica. Now, Veronica is going to be a ranger that's the fire/passion element who fully embraces the role of a sub DPS character. Her main mechanic revolves around her ballista cards, which after playing a turn 1 upgrade card, she can continue to automatically generate at the start of every single turn you have. Now, these cards are going to be unplayable cards that are consumed for an extra attack when you end your turn, so very similar to someone like Renoa. Her abilities are going to boost her extra attack damage via stacks of reload, which can be tracked at the top with an arrow icon. Reload stacks up to 3 times, and each shot consumes 1 stack per target hit. For instance, they can charge to deal AoE damage rather than randomly attacking a single enemy. With that, she turns into a pretty serviceable AoE damage dealer that was able to chip down enemy groups without requiring a ton of AP after her initial setup. Veronica's ultimate further adds to her role by providing a defense-ignoring AoE attack that fully recharges all of her reload stacks. So after you do her initial setup for damage via her upgrade card, she doesn't actually have any or very many attack cards outside of her basic attack cards that you'd in her deck. And as you go through the Chaos Zero Nightmare experience in roguelike mode, you can actually remove these attack cards from her deck entirely. Instead, she's going to be mainly using skill cards that help you cycle through your deck, including ways to draw cards that just aren't hers. They exclude her cards, which makes her quite easy to slot into practically any team composition, in particular when you're trying to support some AP cost hungry damage dealers that want to cycle their own cards as quickly as possible. Veronica is going to allow you to draw your main DPS cards, spend your AP on those cards, and then not have to spend AP on Veronica, as most of her damage is coming from end of turn mechanics. I'm not sure if she's going to be best in slot for any team, but her hybrid role of being someone who can help you cycle through your deck and not really cost that much AP outside of setting her up in your first couple of turns make her a pretty sizable option and a flexible character that could have a pretty awesome role in many teams. And she's also going to be pretty new player friendly for this reason as well, because outside of the first couple of turns with Veronica, you don't really need to directly interact with her cards as a character, and you can focus on using your other 2 characters' cards while Veronica just does her own thing. Next up is going to be Magna. Now, Magna is going to be a defense scaling Vanguard that is of the water/justice element. Her kit's going to be pretty simple and boils down to 2 things: shielding your party and counterattacking. Now, counterattack is a stacking buff that consumes 1 stack per instance of damage that your party takes and allows you to return the favor by having Magna counter them back. And this does work for enemy attacks that hit multiple times. For instance, if you have 5 stacks of counterattack, well, you can trade all 5 stacks of those for 5 actual counterattacks back on the enemy. You can also upgrade her counters through various methods to do AoE damage, so she doesn't fall behind when you're dealing with multiple large enemy team groups. She's got several ways to make sure that she gets counterattack stacks and provides shields and buffs for your party. That's basically all Magna's going to do. The one downside for Magna during the beta is that she was basically competing with Khalipe for the role of shielder and AoE damage dealer and tenacity breaker, and Khalipe a lot of the time just felt better during that role and performing that role. Khalipe just felt that much better to use in basically every single way. We did talk about how Khalipe's probably getting some changes and rebalances to be more of a shielder character and tenacity breaker, so I expect Magna to outshine Khalipe with the actual damage done when CZN is released. However, we're gonna have to see how that pans out when the game is launched. Orlea. Now, Orlea is going to be a controller that's going to be the light/instinct element who supports the team with various ways such as amplification, healing, and a tiny bit of damage. Her core gameplay is going to revolve around summoning and evolving different kinds of creature types that come with different effects and different rarities from 1 to 3 stars. When created, her creature cards usually start at either 1 or 2 star rarity, depending on the ability that you use. And once you have 2 creatures of the same rarity in hand, they're going to automatically fuse to the next highest rarity until they reach the 3-star rarity. Each evolution is going to upgrade their effects, and they come with various different mechanics, such as retain, so you can keep them in your hand until they are played, which helps facilitate her core gameplay mechanic of fusing multiple cards into higher rarities. For example, this 2-star card is going to boost all damage by 20% if played, or instead boost the next attack card played by 10% if you choose to retain it. A lot of the things that Orlea is going to do is give you a larger benefit if you choose to play her card, or you can choose to retain them in your hand to get a smaller benefit. The benefit of keeping them in your hand is, well, you're not playing them, so you're not spending AP on it, and you're just passively boosting up the other actions you're taking by playing other cards from other characters during your turn. You do have to keep in mind, though, that there is a hand limit of 10 cards, which, well, while positive in some situations, can limit how you utilize a character like Orlea with perhaps other characters who want to generate and retain cards as well. Someone like Renoa, who wants to just generate a ton of bullets, keep them in hand, draw them all at the same time with her abilities, might reach a little bit of counterplay with someone like Orlea, who also wants to have cards retained in her hand. For example, if you're trying to draw 10 bullets out of your deck with Renoa, but you already have, well, the cards you drew plus possibly a couple of retained cards from Orlea, you might be drawing 4 or 5 bullets with Renoa instead of the full 10. Orlea isn't a quick character by any means. She kind of wants the battles to be a little bit longer over time so you can have the ability to fuse multiple cards and retain them. And one of the biggest downsides of Orlea during the beta is that if she did suffer from a mental break, all of her summons disappear and you're going to have to start your fusion effects over from the beginning. So from my personal experience playing the beta, she seemed cool, she seemed unique, but her downsides and just how she interacted with the gameplay of Chaos Zero Nightmare as well as other characters just left me feeling that she wasn't that great as an overall character, although I could be wrong because she is pretty universal. She just didn't seem to play very well with a lot of the core gameplay mechanics of the characters and DPSs that I was personally trying to play with. Rin. Now, before we get into Rin, I know she's already been changed and actually just kind of buffed up in every way since the beta, as she seemed to be, well, underperforming by a pretty significant margin. But let's get into it. Now, Rin is a striker that is the Dark Void element, and she is one of the most selfish hyper carry DPSs in Chaos Zero Nightmare. Now, this is because her core mechanic revolves around maintaining a stance called the Dark Cloud stance, which she can activate via 2 of her cards. Now, this stance is going to remain active for as long as she is the only character who uses attack cards. In order to keep track of if she's in this stance or not, you can expect the sword icon next to her picture frame. The stance itself doesn't provide any bonuses, but it directly buffs up her abilities and additional effects and higher multipliers on her cards. While it's hard to gauge her damage output from an early game perspective, it seemed like she was going to push out pretty impressive numbers at the later stages of the game. But her most problematic part of being part of a team is you want to maintain her Dark Cloud stance. Because without the Dark Cloud stance, she's a pretty mediocre character, if not bad. And it makes the teams that you want to be putting Rin in pretty narrow. Pretty much she wants to be paired with only other characters who either rarely or never attack. So support characters are going to be likely candidates that are going to help Rin out when Chaos Zero Nightmare is released. Some other characters that are sub DPSs like we just talked about previously, like Veronica and Hugo, who just kind of don't need to do a whole lot and actually attack with attacking cards themselves. Seem like they're going to pair up pretty nicely with Rin overall. And it is going to be something that you're going to have to really think about when you're meshing and melding a team together to use Rin to her fullest potential, because you definitely do not want to drop that Dark Cloud stance And even though she's going to be a crazy hyper carry, she's probably going to be someone that you're going to want to really think about the team that you're pairing her with as you launch into Chaos Zero Nightmare. I think that potentially she could be one of the best characters for damage in the game if she can find the exact supports to run with her, but we're just gonna have to wait for the future to see how that's going to flesh out. Now, next up is gonna be Luke. Luke is a Wind Order element character and is yet another DPS character. He's gonna be one of the 3 characters who use these bullet style cards like Renoa as their main gimmick mechanic. However, unlike Renoa, he generates different types of bullets randomly selected from 5 possible outcomes. Luke's starter card does require landing critical hits to create 2 bullets, which is exceptionally awkward at the start of the game when we just don't have very many reliable ways to increase our crit rate. However, there is an upgrade that fixes this by guaranteeing a critical hit, but it comes at the cost of producing 1 less bullet overall, which is just kind of a messy situation. All in all, I honestly didn't really enjoy playing with Luke, and I know a lot of it is because he just doesn't seem like he's fleshed out and good early game. He really wants to be landing these crits to generate his bullets. Yes, we talked about how there was ways to get a guaranteed crit at the cost of 1 bullet, but that honestly just seemed like a band-aid fix. In general, his cards just felt a little bit undertuned, the multipliers felt a little bit low, and the added effects didn't really seem to change my gameplay experience all that much. But other than that, Luke is going to be a pretty straightforward character to play. His gameplay is kind of similar to Kayron because his damage is going to scale with the number of bullets you exhaust per turn. However, since the bullets are a little bit more random in what they're generated, and his base card depending on you critting to generate additional bullets, Luke's ideal team composition seemed quite limited. If you compare him to someone like Renoa, who generally avoids actively playing her bullets, the only real synergy for Luke comes from 4 stars, which are essentially AoE versions of Luke, like Lucas. The 2 of them do pair pretty well, but ultimately I felt like Luke was just another damage dealer that's likely to get better into the game as we're able to scale up our crit rate and gain more sources of crit rate. So I expect for him to not just actually be the worst character of all time. However, unlike someone like Rin, who I can definitely see the hyper carry potential of, I'm not really sure about Luke, and if I was to avoid a single character during my early experience in this game, it would probably be avoiding Luke. I will have a full tier list video when the game is launched and everyone's kits have been fully announced and adapted, but for right now, my impressions on what is interesting to pull for, what will be solid to pull for, is this. Now, Khalipe was the most busted character during the beta. We do know that she is getting changed, and I fully expect her damage to go down while she maintains the ability for herself to generate shields for the party and also tenacity break for the party. So unless they nerf those 2 parts of her kit by a massive amount as well, I still think she'll be a very solid option for you. That being said, don't blindly pull for her at the start of the game. I expect her to be a very solid support, and that's what I personally would want from her if I do decide to reroll for her when CZN is released. If you're a big Rin hoper and you want her to be buffed up, do keep an eye on her. If she looks like she's going to be that hyper carry party and you're a theory crafter that's wanting to make Rin the best hyper carry possible and the buffs are coming down the line and everything looks great for her, the numbers are up and it's easy to maintain her sword form, then Rin could be somebody that you could get early during CZN and have the potential for her to carry you later on. You might have a weaker early game, you might not be doing tons of AoE damage with a Rin in your party, but you do have that super crazy boss slayer in your back pocket that you can work towards. So I expect someone like Rin to not be the greatest reroll target, as she's not going to hard carry you early on, but can potentially be a great character for you later. And like I touched on earlier, the highest reroll target for me personally is going to be someone like Kayron. He seemed pretty easy to play as long as you fully understood how the exhaust mechanic of his worked and how he interacts with a lot of the other exhaust mechanic focused characters. His AoE damage was some of the highest hitting in the entire game, but it also did do pretty sizable and strong single target damage. He does come at the cost of having to understand how to utilize exhaust cards in that mechanic as a whole, and requiring maybe a little bit more setup than other characters in that regard. But I really liked using Kayron and really like the ability for me to directly involve myself with such a unique mechanic such as exhaust, allowing him to potentially grow as an even better character in the future if more exhaust focused characters or mechanics in general through whatever game modes are released in Chaos Zero Nightmare are added as content. These would be my big three potentially. If someone like Khalipe isn't the big shielder, then I would look for someone like Magna in that role for big AoE damage. Kayron's gonna be that guy. And then for the potential endgame hyper carry party damage, you could look at someone like Rin. With that being said, guys, make sure you drop that sub below. If you like more Chaos Zero Nightmare, you can find it on this channel. If you want to see it, you have to let the algorithm know. Hit that like button, comment down below, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take care, guys.